I'm looking for a hammer, but not just one like this. No. I'm looking for one like this. So let's get on to making it. This hammer is going to be fully made out of white oak. Next, we start by planing down all this material. Now that they're all planed smooth, I'm going to rip them into the widths that I need for each board. Then, I'm going to take those widths and rip it down to all the thicknesses that I need. I'm making a ton of really small pieces, so let's get to that. The width that I'm looking for is 2 3/8. This will make it so that when all my pieces are folded up, the diameter of the barrel should be about 15 inches at its center. Okay, first issue, but it's not a big one. The thickness that I need to rip each of these at is 1/8, but as you can see, there's a gap where the blade comes up next to the fence that all my pieces are just going to fall right in, so let's fix it. I ended up making another table saw plate out of some plywood I had lying around. So I'm going to place this in and pull my blade up through it to make an exact cut. Now the void is exactly as big as the table saw blade is, so nothing can fall through it. Well, with that problem fixed, I get down to cutting these. This is going to take a while because I need 40 of these 1/8 inch pieces to glue up the barrel. So, nothing to it but to do it. I got a few extra pieces of these white oak, so that's going to be used in a future project. Stay tuned. And with that, all 40 of our pieces are cut to the proper thickness. So now, I'm going to take 2 of these and bend them like this. To do that, I end up making a ton of these small jigs that I can place them on, glue, and then clamp at each end. I gotta do this for 20 different slats, so it's going to be a little bit. This is what one looks like all glued up. I ended up managing to fit 6 pieces into one, making 3 slats at a time. This helped because of the sheer amount of clamps that I need. So now on to cutting everything. I ended up repurposing the bending jig and adding these 2 screws that will hold the piece down. This way when I push it through the saw, it'll be all straight. Here's what one looks like when it's all done. I ended up setting the saw blade to an 18-degree angle. This will make it so my 20 slats will complete a full 360, making a perfect circle. These are all tapered, so that way it's bigger in the middle and smaller at the ends. That's why I bent them before cutting them, so it's further away from the saw blade. As you can see with me cutting it right now, the ends are cutting off more material than the center while I'm pushing it through, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Now all of our slats are cut with the proper angles. This is what 2 of them looks like together. Now to do them to the rest. To put them together, I'm just dabbing glue on the ends and then stapling them all together to hold. This should form a perfect circle, making the perfect barrel shape, and there shouldn't be any issues based off of my measurements. Okay, not quite how I had planned, but that's fine. I'll remove the staples on the ends and just put these back together. Should be fine. Okay, a few mistakes won't hold me back. You know, they say 3rd time's the charm, right? I'm sure 3rd time it'll work. Okay, maybe I just started off a little off. So, I took all the staples out, took all my pieces apart. Now I just put it together. It'll be good this time, right? This might not have seemed like that big of a deal to you guys, but for you, what's 45 seconds? For me was a little over 3 hours, and I was getting fed up with this. I couldn't take it anymore. So I decided I just need to rethink this. I had to take a walk, I had to do something to get my mind off of this, because obviously something was not working as it should be. That's when I remembered my genius idea of reusing this bending jig as a cutting jig. That was the whole problem. Because when these pieces are all clamped together, there's more force under it, keeping it at a bend, and when I undid them, it slightly unbends. And though that might not seem like a big deal, with 20 slats, each little piece wants to pull itself apart, causing all these implosions. And yep, that was my issue. I forgot to record it because I was so fed up with this project, but it ended up working out perfect. It does look a little rough with all these tape and staples, but I should be able to clean it all up and it'll look perfect at the end. Now I'm going to be cutting the handle. This should be pretty easy as I just took some scrap I had left over, cut it down to size, cut 4 angles on it, turning it into a perfect octagon. I drilled the hole on the bottom first, which let me feed the handle through like this. Then I took it, marked it on the other side, drilled the other hole, which let me pass the handle all the way through, kinda like this. I added some supports into the center. This should keep it nice and stop it from collapsing. Now onto the end caps of the hammer. I ended up making the circle jig, measuring the diameter that I needed, and just cut perfect circles using it out of some plywood I had left over. I now have those end cap circles in, and there was no mistakes. There were no mistakes. Okay, maybe a few. I kept cutting them too big, and then bring them down, cut them too short. So, I got it to a part where it's pretty good. You may think those screws look ugly, but it's fine. There's going to be that metal trim that wraps around the end, and should cover all the screws, making it look perfect. Now it's on to making the stars, which starts with a little bit of origami. I'm going to put that on this MDF, which I'm going to cut in half, clean off this little section the saw missed, then I'm going to put both my pieces back together, glue the star on it, and cut that out on my scroll saw. Then just a little bit of sanding, and bam, the star's done on both sides now. Next, I use a belt sander to clean up these end caps and make them perfectly flat across it. Now onto those metal trims. I make a paper template that I measure and make sure that it wraps around perfectly. That way there should be no issue cutting my metal. I tape that template that I just made down onto this sheet of sheet metal and cut it out with some aviation shears. And man, is it hard to cut with aviation shears. It took so long and my hand was cramping the whole time I was cutting. In total, this was about 30 minutes for both pieces. And just because it's this project, guess what? Another issue happened. My first template was bad, I guess, because the metal just would not wrap around properly. No matter how hard I clamped and tapped it down, wouldn't fit. So I had to make a second one, which also didn't fit. Then I made a third one, and finally, that was sitting properly around. But guess what? Even with all those clamps, the epoxy didn't stick. Once again, too angry to film, I ended up using rivets and riveting the whole thing down. But that left a ton of glue for me to clean, and even one of the rivets popped out that I had to replace with a screw. Okay, whatever, that's done. On to painting. A little bit of primer I'm going to use on the stars, then I'm going to take that, put it on the end caps of the barrel, then I'm going to use a little bit of silver, then a little bit of red, then I'm going to use some yellow, put that all over the stars. I started gluing on these stars when I noticed this project really liked to test my sanity. For some reason, somehow, the clear coat set, but the yellow underneath it didn't. So, when I took a closer look, every handprint that I made was embedded into the paint, looking terrible. That's not the end of this nightmare. Because the paint was still not technically dry, I had to scrape it all off by hand with a knife and a heat gun. Because something was off with my yellow spray paint, I ended up painting it by hand. Then I wanted to add withering, but it made the yellow look really awful. But hey, what's one more issue? So I repainted it, and that should be the project all done. So, that's the build. Though it took years off my life and everything that could go wrong did go wrong, that's it. So make sure you subscribe, leave a like, comment down below anything you'd like me to build next, and with that, I'll see y'all later.